Good morning and good afternoon. Thanks to everyone who has joined us already today. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Everybody has been placed on mute for the entirety of the webinar. This is just to ensure no interruptions for our presenters today. That being said, we strongly encourage questions, and you can submit those through your questions module on the GoToWebinar app. We are recording this session, and you'll be able to access that later this week. Our presentation today is Pitfalls to Avoid When Moving JD Edwards to Oracle's Cloud Infrastructure. And at this time, I'll pass it over to Megan Testani with Denovo to introduce our presenters.
All right, thank you so much and welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. We are here to get some great information. So first up, we have Jeff Callows from Oracle. Jeff is a principal cloud architect for the Package Apps Group on OCI in the North American Cloud Engineering Group of Oracle. Jeff has over 25 plus years working with Oracle in a variety of capacities in Latin and North America, always focused on JD Edwards, and most recently as cloud architect assisting partners and customers in successfully transforming their business to the cloud. We also have Paul Cioni, who is the Chief Technical Officer and Executive Vice President of Operations for Denovo. In his role, Paul is responsible for ensuring the technology strategy and cloud operations Denovo implements helps our customers reduce cost, mitigate risk, and achieve better business outcomes. Paul is a tech services veteran specializing in technology, architecture, operations, and innovation. Now with our quick intro, I won't hold us up any further. Paul, why don't you take it away for us?
Thank you, Megan. Jeff, I want to thank you for joining us on this presentation for the Oracle perspectives. And then for our attendees, thanks for taking the time out of your day today. Between Jeff and I, my hope is that we'll leave you with at least a tidbit or two, but that you can take away and make some hay with. But first and foremost, I wanted to help with a little definition of pitfalls. Megan asked us to talk about this, and Jeff and I spent some time trying to define what pitfalls were, and this was the best kind of graphical representation I could think of with, say, the dog here representing your workload, perhaps JDE, and that rocket being new technology, new deployment approaches, say OCI, or migrating your JDE workloads to the cloud. Obviously, the dog seems prepared. He's got his goggles on, but I do like to mention that when we light that rocket, I'm not sure we're going to have a happy puppy. I'm pretty sure we're going to have the hound's attention, but I'm not sure that the puppy's going to be happy. So between Jeff and I, my hope is we can help make you all happy puppies as we discuss pitfalls to avoid when moving your JDE workloads to OCI. So let's talk a little bit about clouds and why OCI, and then I'll toss it over to Jeff. We're going to do some segues back and forth. We've rehearsed this, I think now, Jeff, 74 times, but we're not movie stars, so we may need a little bit of your latitude on our handoffs. But clouds, everyone knows, I think, what cloud is. It's really just someone else's computer at the base of it, but it's meant to be hyperscale. In other words, to give you resources you may not be able to access promptly, almost immediately. Those resources, or at least the sources of those resources, should be abstract from the users. You don't need to know whether it's this kind of server or that kind of server. Good hyperscale clouds like OCI, like Azure, tell us that they're highly reliable. If one node of the cloud goes down, another node picks up that workload without you having to make a lot of decisions. They are cost effective. In most cases, they allow a shift from CapEx to OpEx, or at least allow you to right size your CapEx and OpEx instances. They also allow for better oversubscription, driving down the costs of specific resources. I'm going to take a break there and just say those are general clouds. Let's talk about OCI specifically. We see OCI as a cloud that is purpose-built for Oracle workloads and the systems that interface to or integrate with them. And I'll tell you a couple of reasons. The first is curated operating systems. There's a tome of knowledge. You can use the Google and find out that Linux with Oracle's unbreakable enterprise kernel just runs better in OCI, and Oracle workloads are optimized for that operating system. So we find that to be a great solution for moving our Linux workloads into cloud, specifically OCI. And then finally, things like OCI DBAS, one of the greatest tools that Oracle's given us to help us with licensing challenges, to drive better utilization of our compute and maintenance spend. So as it pertains to cloud, I think you're here because you know what cloud is. I just wanted to highlight a couple of those things as it pertains to OCI specifically. Jeff?
All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Jeff Callowis. Just wanted to talk about kind of, Paul and I wanted to make this a little more real world, and not, hopefully not a marketing spill. So we'll tell you what we're seeing and, what some of the use cases for JDE to OCI and the most probable use cases. So initially, a lot of times we would say, well, just move your dev test to the cloud and then production to the cloud. And, in some cases, backup in DR only. So having JD Edwards or database on-premise and then backing that up to the cloud. And then really OCI can be an extension of your data center, right? So I would say that the most common use cases that we're seeing, especially with JD Edwards, is literally moving, improving, and moving the whole 9 yards to the cloud. That really is the most common use case. And then extending OCI, Oracle Cloud becomes an extension of your data center once it's interconnected to the networking. And by moving, non-production and production to the cloud, that eliminates by the segmentation, JD Edwards being a single global region. So those are probably the most common use cases that we're seeing, and people are embracing the cloud. And moving production workload to the cloud, and then extending that, through for the appropriate networking technology to your data center. Next slide. So, what are the goals of moving JD Edwards to, and the kind of the planning transformations, right? So, we're hoping to cover today and give you some ideas. Is moving JD Edwards to the cloud is kind of the readiness, planning, some migration steps, and maintenance, and then optimize. I'm in the cloud. What services can I start leveraging? And it's overall, how do I transform my business into a digital transformation? It's a lot easier to do that when I have services available in the cloud, available to me, and I'm not spending all my time sort of maintaining servers and environments. So overall, we'll give you an overview of readiness, plan, migrate, maintain, and hopefully some ideas to optimize. Next slide.
All right, we're going to spend a lot of our time on readiness and planning. We'll touch on migration, run, and optimize, and we'll try to provide a set of examples, or at least some real-world examples. But I think, Jeff, one of the things you and I agreed on, I think wholeheartedly, was that proper prior planning is going to prevent poor performance in the future. There's a lot of things to think about as we start moving workloads into the hyperscale cloud, specifically OCI and specifically JDE. And what we wanted to do was at these stages talk about some of the potential pitfalls. So I'm gonna progress down to the next slide. As we think about readiness, one of the first things we want to talk about is reference architecture. The ability to look at big blocks on a Visio diagram or a PowerPoint or a cocktail napkin and go, okay, that's a database, that's an enterprise server, that's my directory server, that's my my network connectivity, and then to look at each of those reference architecture components and decide based on my requirements, my preferences, and my constraints, what the right instantiation of that reference architecture component is. And Jeff's going to talk a lot about this, but you know, a great example is if we need high availability, that database block becomes a cluster of 2 servers perhaps. And if we need to have Microsoft SQL compatibility, it becomes SQL server clusters. Or if we want to take advantage of Oracle Tech Foundation, it becomes perhaps a cluster of Oracle servers. But those are just attributes that we instantiate based sometimes on our requirements, preferences, and constraints. The other things we want to think about are our applications version, our tools versions, our database versions, and our operating systems. We'll talk a bit about, Jeff will, about lift and shift versus move and improve. But as we take this step into the hyperscale cloud, we're going to have an opportunity to revalidate our data, test some of those integrations, and think about ways to perhaps reduce complexity. Maybe our price objects can be reduced and be subsumed into the new functionality of an ESU or an applications version. Being able to look at those changes and make the right decisions across our cloud journey, now versus later, seems like a great way, or is one of the things that we've agreed is important to assess for readiness. Jeff?
All right. So just talking about reference architecture at a high level, what the engineering teams have done and the Applications Unlimited and JD Edwards team has developed a blueprint. It's not the only way, but a starting point or a blueprint for running JD Edwards, testing JD Edwards, and certifying JD Edwards on Oracle OCI. And part of that is creating a blueprint and enhancing that based on your requirements. So some of those components are having active server redundancy, having a high level of resilience, database redundancy, and overall backup strategy. So think of it as a blueprint and a starting point, as a reference architecture, something to reference to test it. Next slide. So in what we do for high availability and resiliency in a single AD, or Oracle has multi-AD data centers and single AD. So what we're doing with high availability in a single AD availability domain is achieving and deploying the database and deploying the middle tier and the application tier across fault domains. So fault domains is a grouping of hardware that's isolated from the other set of hardware paired to it. So we can achieve resiliency and high availability by marrying these and pairing these in different fault domains, depending on the requirement. So we'll ensure high availability within a single active availability domain. Next slide. And then we have the next major component, which is either disaster recovery. Typically we see, which can be what we call region DR or leveraging availability domains, depending on if you want to be across country, depending on your RTO, PTO, geographical location, we can accomplish disaster recovery, whether it be a multi-AD scenario or completely across the country based on your RTO, PTO, and geographical areas. So we would peer the VCNs, we would peer the networking components, and we could do active, passive, and replicate the VMs across region or across availability lanes. So you can maintain the servers in an AD or across region. You may not have that high level of disaster recovery requirements, so we may subset it down and just leveraging good old backups from the OCI console may be enough depending on your requirements. But this is a couple ways. This is a reference architecture that's built and deployed using the JD Edwards and OCI infrastructure. And then we take it as a starting point and modify it from there. Next slide.
So that would be our first kind of pitfall, is that you should start with that reference architecture. Start with the blueprint for the house that you want to build, not putting drapes in the master bedroom, if that's a decent analogy. Those reference architectures, Oracle has helped us instantiate in a number of different ways, again, based on the customer's, your specific requirements, preferences, and constraints. And so our first kind of discussion point is, what size or capacity do we really need? And that's one of the great things about OCI, is we're able to scale up and scale down even after deployment, once we kind of get to a steady state. We've got a set of reference architectures, as Jeff has shown you, and they can be instantiated in different t-shirt sizes. So if you're a extra large customer, perhaps you need 4 web servers. If you're a medium customer, perhaps you just need a pair of redundant AIS servers. Next, we want to look at service entitlements, everything from application availability to responsiveness and resolution to disaster recovery and business continuity, specifically RTO and RPO, and even patching windows, backup, data retention, and archival. Those are all very different concepts. And one of the things that Oracle and Denovo have been partnering closely on is helping customers pick the right t-shirt size against which to instantiate that reference architecture, such that they get the best bang for their cloud buck. And so I wanted to take a moment and just talk about a large architectural cooperative that started with finance and some purchasing procurement, but eventually moved into manufacturing and distribution. And as they made acquisitions and as they drove different needs for entitlements, specifically application availability from kind of 99.5% to 99.9%, Oracle and Denovo were able to instantiate a high availability architecture that included clustered database servers with Oracle Active Data Guard, multiple enterprise batch and logic servers, so that we could ensure that if there was a failure at the infrastructure tier, the customer would just simply access the other enterprise batch and logic servers. And then, of course, load balanced web servers across both of these pods or chains to deliver 99.5% application availability, and also to be able to do patching and maintenance without service interruptions. And so that was one of the, I think, in my years doing this, that was one of the areas where we took a reference architecture that Oracle had developed and provided. We instantiated it for a specific customer need. We began with that blueprint, and we continue to evolve the blueprint based on the customer's requirements. So, Jeff, I'll let you pick up from here.
So what we're going to cover is the right cloud and the stage of the journey. We have considerations for customizations. Do we need all that data? And cover consumption, licensing, and talk a little bit about move and improve versus lift and shift. So a lot of questions we get is sort of what, and Oracle I think has done a great job in simplifying access to the services. So in OCI, to access services, you have a couple different models available to you. It can be you get, first of all, once you sign up for OCI, you get unlimited access to all Oracle Cloud services. So it's a consumption simplified procurement process, and you get access to all services. So in the past, we used to have to create a bill of materials for every single line item, and it's just no longer the case. So we have a couple different models. We have pay-go for consuming Oracle services, which is if you are just getting out the gate and want to do a little bit of a one server, 2 server, 3 server, you can sign up for pay-go OCI tenant, and which has no upfront commitment, and you only pay for what you use. So for example, If you're running a couple VMs, you shut those VMs down, and then you're no longer paying for the consumption. If you are ready to do a little bit larger deployment, then monthly flex is a probably more economical and more conducive process for consumption. And monthly flex is you have a 1-year commitment and tentative agree on your monthly spend. So larger deployments are going to be consuming, on the monthly flex most likely. But if you're ready to just get started with no annual commit, pay-go is a great option just to get started, and they can be converted. Next slide. Also, a lot of considerations we get in questions is, where can I run JD Edwards? So JD Edwards is a bring your own license model. So if you have 100 licenses of JD Edwards applications, you can run that in OCI, or you can run 50 on-prem. But if you need 200, that would be considered an expansion. So no real consideration other than to ensure that you have the entitlement to the licenses that you want to run, and you can run those in OCI without any problem. And a lot of our customers also have what we call Oracle Technology Foundation, which includes kind of the red stack, WebLogic and Oracle Database Standard Edition. And Technology Foundation is also eligible for what we call BYO, the PaaS, or Platform as a Service. So instead of taking the traditional running Oracle database on compute or on-prem, we're able to leverage your Oracle license, and you'll have all the benefits and capabilities of the database platform, OCI DBAS, as we mentioned earlier, which is a platform as a service. So that includes automation, backups, all integrated into the OCI console and the control. So it's a great fit for customers, on the lower end. So no worries, just make sure if you need to run 100 licenses, you've got 100 licenses, you can run those in OCI. Next slide. So planning. So you want to do some planning for Oracle database and or SQL Server. So we'll go over the Universal Cloud Credits, which I just went over. Oracle applications is the BYOL, and we also have Microsoft considerations. We do have a large base on Microsoft SQL Server, and I believe the next slide has a couple of considerations on that as well. So SQL Server is also eligible for license portability. You certainly want to check with Oracle as a document, the Microsoft license portability options. All cloud vendors have portability options for their database. So you'll want to be able to check to ensure that your license is migratable to OCI. Additionally, for flexibility, the universal credits, which we went over a couple slides ago, we also offer Microsoft SQL Server Standard and Enterprise as part of the subscription process. So you can subscribe to SQL Server within your Oracle contract if that is a better fit. Windows licensing is separate for that. We also see a lot of customers taking into consideration, taking into consideration maybe it's time to move, fully from Microsoft SQL Server to Oracle Red Stack or Oracle Database based on the benefits. So that's also a lot of considerations. We're seeing a lot of traction on that as well. Next slide. So a little bit about move and improve and so taking the opportunity. So you might hear the word lift and shift, which is a little bit more as is. So JD Edwards, we have a wide customer base on various versions of JD Edwards applications, tools, and infrastructure. And what we see for OCI is, move and improve is ideal for customers seeking control of their Oracle application and taking that opportunity to, while pivoting and moving to cloud, to maybe do some improvements. It could be, most commonly we would see would be leveraging the pre-built newer operating systems, database versions that OCI has to offer, upgrading tools. So a lot of our customers are taking this opportunity to do some incremental or major improvements by leveraging the Oracle Cloud infrastructure. So instead of doing all this work on-prem, they're running that in conjunction with their pivot and migration to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So taking that opportunity and that flexibility to add some value by moving and improving and optimizing. And the application is optimized for Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So we see more of that versus taking the older operating systems and the older tools and the older databases. We'll see more frequently moving and improving it to OCI, leveraging that migration time frame and taking advantage of more in OCI. It's like, and Oracle and Denovo have a whole entire process, moving to OCI. We have migration tools, migration assistance. No re-architecture if you don't want to, but we evaluate that with the move and improve. What can I take advantage of? Improving it and rapidly provisioning it. Next slide.
So we talked about a couple of pitfalls in our planning process. We spent a lot of time on planning, but I did want to re-highlight them. First, the reference architecture, having a blueprint to go forward with. And then Jeff, I think licensing considerations, making sure if you want to bring Microsoft SQL Server to OCI, you've got license portability or support portability enabled, and you check that with Microsoft. Or you understand the costs of subscription-based licensing, SPLA, on Oracle. But it's always a great opportunity to look at potentially moving more to RedStack. You get free database with your JDE Tech Foundations. And then I think, Jeff, fantastic job on kind of going, gosh, you're taking a bite here to move. Why not evolve your lift and shift strategy to a move and improve strategy to see if you can't come up with or have a better result, maybe fix a few of the things your users have been vocal about, or potentially make some changes around modernization of OS or database so that you get the benefit of testing that and validating that change in conjunction with that same level of validation and testing you might do on moving to the cloud. Couple other just nits to think about are directory services. What's your directory services profile going to be, including any single sign-on options and things you might need on the security side, like multi-factor authentication. Oracle provides us some solutions, and then there's ways to bring your own solutions. Network requirements to include public and private facing VCNs, virtual cloud networks, and IP addresses. Really, does your JD Edwards need to be addressable or accessible by through the public internet, or do you go through central office, ride a WAN or a fast connect to OCI? Think about load balancing. We've had some examples where our customers didn't necessarily think load balancing through, along with the hyperscale limitations. You're not going to be able to get to network load balancing by managing at the router or layer 2 or layer 3. You're going to need to use application load balancers, and then just thinking about regions, availability, domains, and fault domains. Jeff talked about them in the context of reference architecture, but recall JDE needs a database server, a batch server, enterprise server, and web servers to function along with directory services, etc. Kind of putting an enterprise server in an availability domain and a database server in a different availability domain doesn't necessarily give you any better availability, because you need those. Now, surely putting them in different fault domains, or making sure you have web servers in different availability domains, making sure your domain controllers perhaps are spaced across availability domains, make sure that when you back something up, even using Oracle's backup services, you have a different storage approach for that outside the availability domain, or perhaps outside the region, again, based on your requirements, preferences, constraints, including your appetite for risk. So let me take a moment and just talk about a global real estate investment and development firm we helped move to the cloud. Load balancing and network, along with directory services, became kind of the issues that with prior planning, we were able to kind of accelerate some of the embracing of different capacities. It takes a little bit the first time to transition from, say, network load balancing to application or appliance-based load balancing. There are good ways to do it, all in the context with those reference architectures, and Oracle's nice enough to provide us some of those capabilities for free. As you start to diversify, needing to work in edge workloads or multi-cloud environments, being able to do things like access ADFS and federate with the cloud of clouds, whether that be an Azure tenancy or an edge tenancy in your private cloud. Those things require good design, good planning to avoid turning a 3-month project into an 8-month bigger project. So again, I think, Jeff, we've caught most of the discussions here around pitfalls in the planning process. I think we should move along to migration. So a couple of brief discussions on migration. We'll spend less time here than we did in planning, but the first thing that I would say is good project planning and governance. Understand what you want to accomplish along your cloud journey, why you're making the move, and pardon me, ignore the temptation to do things that may be outside your project plan. If you've decided that you're going to defer, say, implementation of new modules to an optimize phase, then heck, you should defer them no matter how tempting it seems to be to do kind of implementations with migrations. There's plenty of options for secure cloud data transfer, including getting an appliance from Oracle. We've used that a number of times. Finally, during the migration or in conjunction with the migration, don't be afraid to leverage your existing investments in, say, monitoring, runbooks, endpoint detection and response, and vulnerability management. Oracle is flexible enough to let you bring your own tools in order to maintain that single pane of glass or use the things you've already licensed. If you don't have those tools, though, and we'll talk about this a bit later, Oracle is able to allow us to, Oracle is able to give us a set of tools and utilities that can be leveraged to do these functions for you if you don't have something you're already kind of attached to. We had a global manufacturing firm that was moving from a more traditional private cloud, one of the bigger, bluer clouds, to OCI. And we had some great experiences around planning and governance, needing to find the right way to transfer all this data. Again, the first time we did this, not so easy, but after a number of options and a number of customers, nearly 100, we found out the right data transfer approach for the right workload. Further, being able to use different tools and utilities and abstract those so that the customer gets the business benefit without having to rebuy those solutions like some other clouds might force you to do, I think is an exceptional business benefit to migrating JDE to OCI. So those are some really, I think, compelling things about the migration phase that were worth discussing. Jeff, how about maintenance?
So once you're in maintaining JDE, and once you've migrated, these are opportunities, like we said a little bit earlier, you may want to evolve to Autonomous Database by Oracle Autonomous Database. It's an opportunity to get a code current, do the tools upgrade, and then really focus on performance tuning and some security options and security enhancements.
Let's talk a little bit about security. In addition to the autonomous database that Jeff mentioned, Oracle Autonomous Linux, self-patching or online patching, it's a great option to evolve to as JDE starts to certify these different options. database encryption is provided by Oracle at no additional cost, and same kind of database encryption that you might get from optional fees. It's all TDE, or transparent data encryption. Oracle provides us with CloudGuard, the ability to see and know about specific exploitable security risks or holes based on your use case, and then Oracle Data Safe that helps us make sure that our data safeguards, to include protection, loss prevention, etc., are all visible to you as the cloud consumer. I see this as kind of enlightened self-interest on Oracle's part, giving us the tools to make sure that in the shared security model, just like all of these hyperscale clouds, and giving them to us at low or no cost, allows us to really take a step into application-oriented security, specifically as it pertains to Oracle workloads in the hyperscale cloud. Jeff, I think this is you, brother.
Yeah, so once we're in OCI, this gives us an opportunity to, right sizing. So what we, when we do the initial architecture and architecture sizing, that we look at your current state and then migrate that and calculate that for moving that to cloud. But this is really an opportunity that once you're in OCI is to monitor the environment, whether it be through and the usage of the database and the VMs, and gives you an opportunity to right size your environment. We see things and applications just perform better. It's faster, more efficient in OCI. We have a number of options to right size. So once you're in OCI, go through a second round and look at the utilization, and it might mean consolidating. Well, instead of 4 database or 4 web servers, I really only need 2. Changing the capability to change shapes, on demand, going from Intel X7 to maybe a little bit lower cost for those development workstations, the E3 Flex, which is the end. So it's a great opportunity to optimize and do performance tuning once you transition. If you started out as a pay-go, a little bit smaller environment, we can transition you from a pay-go to, the monthly fix with the year subscription. So we see a lot of that. And take this time to, eliminate or evaluate a lot of the shelfware or third-party programs that may not be necessary in, once you've migrated. And if you've upgraded tools or upgraded the application, it's a great opportunity to easily leverage new functionalities, UDOs. Orchestrator is probably the #1 request when you implement it if you're coming from a tools release. Taking a look at your integration options and consolidating those and improving those. Some of the areas that we see for optimization and opportunity is Oracle ATP Autonomous Database, which gives you the capability of automatic performance tuning and taking away from self-healing and self-correcting database. So it gives you a lot of flexibility, so your DBAs do not need to manage the environment. It's all in the positioning of autonomous, similar to the autonomous Linux, is be able to launch new revenue streams and have faster time to market. So autonomous database will do the work for you, allowing your staff and DBAs to work on other projects. Another area for opportunity is once you're in the cloud is taking a look at integrations, implementing Oracle Integration Cloud, which has a lot of pre-built adapters and recipes for integrations along with the orchestration. These are areas that we see as optimization once you're in the cloud. Could be looking at reporting options, data warehouse options. All those are available to you as part of the initial subscription and get into cloud.
All right, so I think, Jeff, thanks for closing out the optimize phase for us. I feel like that's kind of our last pitfall, which would be kind of taking a bigger bite necessarily than you really have to. I like doing operating system upgrades and the security benefits. I like implementing the security tools on the migration. I like potentially embracing a tools upgrade or a database upgrade. Those last few things, though, OCI is highly flexible and scalable so that we're able to kind of get the current business processes embedded in the hyperscale cloud, and then look at some of these things like integration cloud or some of the other capacities like autonomous to optimize our maintainability, our supportability, and to liberate some of our maintenance time to be focused on giving our users a better experience, whether that be through orchestrations or user-defined objects or any of those great new things that Oracle's given us in the latest tools releases of JD Edwards. So with that, let me turn it back to Megan and see if there's any questions for us here at the end of this session.
Okay, thank you. Alyssa, I know the questions were coming into you. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put them into that Q&A section. But Alyssa, any questions that have come in?
No questions that have come in on my side, so well, I can see a couple people typing, so we'll let them submit those. And just a reminder, they have provided contact information on the screen, so if you have questions after the presentation, please reach out. Let's see. What are the specific services Denovo offers to migrate and or host in OCI?
So I could take a crack at that. Denovo provides analysis of requirements, reference architectures, the instantiation of those reference architectures in conjunction with your requirements, preferences, and constraints, and then a flexible engagement model. So if you as the customer are looking for more of a turnkey service, Denovo can do everything from planning to actually testing and validation assistance. And then once you're in OCI, we can do as much as or as little of the managed services that you want. We have some customers who ask us to do simply CNC, where other customers ask us to do technical operations, application lifecycle management as a service, which includes code current and tools and technology upgrades, or functional support, which is the transition from kind of just helping us with what worked yesterday and doesn't work today to really helping us use the software that we've invested so much in to get a better business outcome. Unlike some of the larger providers, we're not a one-size-fits-all kind of place. We want to create the service profile that you want and do those services that you don't necessarily want to do because you want those staff people to be liberated to make the world a better place for you and your users. But the maintenance activities, the optimization activities, being able to leverage a community of hundreds of customers, that's what Denovo is good at, specifically focused on JDE and other Oracle ERP workloads in our cloud of clouds.
Perfect. Thank you for that question. I don't see any others right now. So again, reach out to the contact information on the screen. The recording will be made available. You also have the contact information for our team at Quest. So don't hesitate to reach out. Let's see. One more just came through. Generally speaking, is the cloud more or less secure than on-premise?
So Jeff, I'll let you do the second round on this one, if that's okay. I would say the answer is neither. I would say that from a security perspective, good health and hygiene is cloud independent. Things like endpoint detection and response, vulnerability management, log scanning, understanding, having good inventory of the software that's running in your infrastructure, and making sure that it is well maintained, well patched, etc. All I need to do is say things like solar winds, and it should send chills up and down your spine. Now, for customers that don't have a core data center operation. Physical security is much better in these hyperscale clouds. If you've ever visited an Oracle data center, either in Ashburn or in Arizona, they ask you 10,000 questions, fingerprints, blood samples, all the rest. Of course, I exaggerate, but that physical security layer, things like certifications and leveraging high trust for things like GovCloud and HIPAA Cloud and all those other things. For sure, these hyperscale clouds have an advantage. But in just where we see most of the exploits, either negligent insiders or outsiders who may want to be bad actors, the requirement to do good health and hygiene, I think, transcends the cloud or your choice of the clouds. Jeff, I'm not sure if you've got a differing or a complementary opinion on that.
Yeah, and I mean, OCI is built, with security in mind from the ground up, right? So we have intrusion monitoring and a number of activities. We don't have access to your VMs per se, but we're continuously monitoring the environment.
That's a good question. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like no more questions right now. So before we close out, a big thank you to our speakers, Jeff and Paul, and thank you to Megan for helping organize all of this. Any closing thoughts before we go today?
Just, Jeff, it was fantastic working on this with you. Thanks for all of the time.
I'm glad we're very successful in joint projects and working together. Denovo with OCI.
And thank you to Quest for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, guys, for the content today. And for everybody else, just check the calendar. The next sessions start here in 30 minutes, and JD Edwards Week continues this whole week. So I hope everyone has a great day, and we catch you on another webinar. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for coming, everyone.